Hi. In this presentation we're just going to quickly cover what gamification is and how it may be applied in higher education. So, any discussion of gamification starts necessarily with video gameplay or gaming. In Australia, video gameplay is really common, as you can see from some of the stats there. Game consoles are in most houses in Australia. There's actually quite a good gender split for game playing, whereas it was originally thought that more males than females were playing. It's sort of evened out over time. The average age of the gamer is 32, but people who are younger, in particular the age range that we normally see in the classroom, is very well represented. So in summation, games are played by our students. So the question in gamification is, how can we leverage the popularity of video games in a meaningful way to lift the quality of teaching in higher education? And this is really motivated by the recognition that people will spend hours playing video games, will be absorbed in it, engaged, entertained, and they'll want to do it. A lot of those descriptors are probably counter to what we experience in our classrooms, or at least for me. So gamification is really about finding what are those underlying principles that make video games work. Now that question in and of itself is something that the video game industry has been thinking about and working on for a long time, and that's really part of their success. They have been able to identify what it is about their products that work and make new products that leverage those key points of interest. But it's only very recently that we've thought about using those same sort of principles and seeing whether they are applicable in higher education settings. Now this is just a brief run through of some of the core components of games. There's far more detailed literature out there, and in the coming slides you'll see some references for further reading if you're interested. But this will just give you a flavour of the types of things to consider and how you can see that it actually isn't too far removed from higher education sort of setups. So firstly, a key component of these games is that they're fun. They must be fun if you're going to engage in them for an extended period of time. It's often something that is missed in our curriculum. We have content that has to be transmitted, and then we ask students to relay that they understand it through some form of assessment, without due consideration of actually making it an engaging experience for them. So other components include having a clear goal in mind. What is the outcome in this game, or how do we know when someone wins the game? A parallel in higher education settings is, how do we know when a student has learnt the core content? What do they need to demonstrate in order to pass or to do better than a pass grade? You can think about this in terms of the ultimate goal, so the end of semester grade or the end of the game, completing it in its entirety. But it's also helpful to think about it in terms of these small incremental steps that they make in order to get there. And that's something that we also consider in higher education, with generally smaller tasks to get students engaged and to gain some momentum in terms of the skills and the content that we require them to grasp in our subjects. And through that developed confidence and self-efficacy, we then give them increasingly complex tasks to build them up to that final win state or win condition that we want them to achieve. So in setting up those goals, we also consider obstacles. If the game's too easy, it's boring, quickly forgotten, and we lose students in engagement. On the other hand, if it's too difficult from the outset, the students don't have the skills up front to begin to engage with the process, we may lose them as well. So it's really about staggering these things. You're sort of climbing a mountain as you go. There are sort of peaks along the way, and then it plateaus, and then further peaks until they reach the ultimate goal that you've set for the students. And the third element is, and it can be either of the two, a collaborative sort of approach where you have the gamers working together to beat the game, or you can have a competitive approach where the gamers are competing against each other. Now you can think of parallels in higher education for both of those. We have group activities where we try to get group members to work together to build up group work skills and a range of other skills as they go through the process, and then ultimately submit some sort of work together to get a desired grade. We can also think of competitive situations. I guess an obvious example would be to have leaderboards or some sort of ranking system, as we often do. Obviously, we have a student who is at the top of the class for a particular subject for a particular semester, and then all the students that follow could be ranked in order below that student. We typically don't show those grades to the students, so they don't know how they're doing relative to others, but that could be incorporated to engage in this sort of competitive aspect, and it may have some sort of benefits for them actually engaging in the course content. There are also other things that can be done, and when people think about gamification in terms of higher ed, the lowest common denominator tends to be badging or these leaderboards, as if that's the only aspect. And if it were the only aspect, it's a pretty mundane aspect, and it's not likely to keep people engaged or interacting with the content. But they have their place so that people can actually mark their status in terms of how much work they've actually done, and they get recognition for it. So it's sort of a feedback loop to say, well done, you're on the right track, keep going. So these are the core components of any particular game, and you can see how they may translate into what we do here at Deakin. So I've kept it very brief to this point. If you're really interested or have some queries, by all means email me or follow up with some of these readings. Now, the Lee Sheldon book is considered one of the classic texts in this particular area. It's a really thorough account of how you might incorporate gaming principles in the classroom setting. Well worth the read. I've also included a couple of shorter readings. Just a lot of them are web-based. As you'll see, there's not much empirical literature in the form that we're used to in terms of books and articles at this stage, because it is a new and flourishing area. So a lot of the references I've provided here are from websites. And at the bottom of the page as well, we've also got some examples that you can actually see these principles in action.